Life is not worth living without honor. Honor grounds us. It gives us a chance to see where we stand in the world. And without it, oftentimes the things that we have to do don't have too much substance, and other people can feel that. Any of the most successful people that you'll see online, anyone that you probably find as a role model, has some degree of honor in their life, whether it's for their family, for their business, whatever it is. That honor is the why behind what they do. And it's understandable that most of America, if not most of the world, doesn't prioritize necessarily the importance of honor in terms of setting big goals, because frankly it's something that's hard to define. It's a soft skill, much like talking with people, much like love in general. Honor is tremendously difficult to foster, because honor requires you to do things that are really awkward for your schedule. I'll give you an example. My grandmother passed away this weekend, the last one in the family. And, my mom called me yesterday around like 8 o'clock, and she said, "Hey man, we got to take a flight out to California for a funeral." And I had a lot of plans this weekend. And so at first I was like, should I really go? I got all this shit to do, whatever. And my mom's like, "Dude, get your shit together. What are you talking about? You're going." And so I had to recalibrate, because I consider my mother a very wise person in my life in terms of, keeping up with relationships and just the way that she treats people. I love that. And so I had to reconcile my own hindrance, my own lack of desire to go and see my family potentially. And I realized that being away from home made it so that I feel that I am not as connected to the very things that gave birth to me, my roots. And this was a really good chance for me to test my character, right? It's very easy to say no to situations like this, especially if you have important stuff going on. But the reality is, if you do say no, you miss out on something that's essential to building your character. Catching up with family, staying in touch with the people that raised you. There's very few things in life that are going to build you up like that. Very, very few things in life. And you might be asking yourself, well, what is honor, Tarab? If you're giving this video, what is honor? And to me, honor starts at home. Your family is your honor, right? If you have a broken past, or you have difficult situations that occur because of your family, our tendency is to run away from that. Our tendency is to say to ourselves, you know what, maybe this isn't so healthy for me, maybe this is not so great for my career, so I'm just going to depart. And the reality is that if we end up doing that, then what's to stop us from departing from those new relationships that we have? Right? So honor is this kind of anchor for our ship, right? It's in situations where we need to stand still and we need to hold our ground. Honor is the thing that gives us the strength to do that. And it's something that's not discussed very often, which is kind of strange in the West, because it's a meritocracy, technically. Technically, it's a meritocracy, which means that the people that do the best, the people that provide the most value, are the ones that eventually end up making the most money and get the most attention. And honor and merit, to me, are very similar, because your honor determines your merit, right? If you go and watch the interviews of some of the billionaires that are currently making huge waves in the United States and in the world, you realize that after a certain amount of income, it's not even about, your bullheadedness and getting ahead. It's literally about how good you are at fostering those relationships and making people feel like you really care about them, right? And that you will stand when things get rough. And so what they end up doing is they go and find references, right? So they have 5 references of stuff that you tell them, and then they go and find 5 references of bosses that you've had, the 5 references of people that you worked with, how many deals you've closed. And if all of those people have something good to say, they know immediately that you're worth investing in, right? So your honor, when it comes down to prowess in the United States, or probably in the entire world, is huge. And something that's not talked about very often, because it's kind of this like, it's almost prideful to have honor, right? To say to yourself that your family is somehow more special than other people or other lives, you know? It's like this, it's the first instance when you start believing in honor, it's the first instance of you taking a stand for what you believe in. And that is so necessary if you intend to do any sort of leadership, any sort of initiatives, right? If you are easy to move, right, from a position, then you're not really all that useful. At the end of the day, it really comes down to, hey, when you say something, does that stand, right? Does your word matter? That's where honor is. Now, where else could you get some honor, right? I was watching an interview the other day of someone saying that the reason that a lot of people don't end up becoming very successful in the States is because they pick up something, right? They do that thing, something hopefully that's enjoyable to them. And then at some point, the rote tenacity at which you have to do something to get good at it becomes incredibly depressing, right? It's difficult because you have to keep at it despite anything that you're going through in life. And that, coined by Alex Hermosi, his interview, is the valley of despair. Okay, so there's the sense that you're going to eventually, anything that you do, you're going to eventually get to a point where it is difficult and draining to keep pursuing that. Now, the caveat to all of this is the difficulty actually is the barrier for entry, right? So the only way that people end up doing more in life to get the most out of life is through struggle. It's through struggle, because most people are not willing to struggle. And the valley of despair, once you've captivated that, and you keep pushing, apparently you get to a point, and I say apparently, I've pushed, and I'm getting to a point where I might be out of it very soon. But when you get to that point, that you've pushed so hard and you move past it, then you have value, right? Because now you've taken the emotional hit that's required to call yourself a specialist in that thing. So most people end up switching. They get to the valley of despair and they say, I can't handle this. And then they drop off. And then they go and do something else. And they get to the valley of despair and then they don't do it again. And then they go and do something else. And by virtue of hopping around and not specializing in any particular thing, the value is diminished. Because what does that show people, right? It's like, okay, you start something and then you don't finish it. Simple as that. Do you want to work with someone that one day they're going to say one thing to you, and then the next day you're going to think to yourself, well, why the hell am I thinking about working with this person? They're not capitalizing. They're not making what they said happen. No, you're not. You're going to lose your merit. So that ability to hang on through the valley of despair, and that ability to say to yourself, no, I will stand my ground despite the storms that are coming around me. That's honor. That comes from honor. 100%. There is no other harder pill to swallow than the one that says to you, listen, this is what I stand for. And despite anything that happens, I will do this thing. Because when you break that in your own head, then you become despicable in your own head, right? To let down someone or people that believed in you, that trusted in you, reduces your own sense of who you are. That says, because then when you go to sleep at night, when you look in the mirror, you say to yourself, well, what am I worth? If the very people that love me cannot trust me or cannot rely on me, then what am I worth? We live as long as the depth of our relationships. Simple. Every other factor is inconsequential compared to how much you love the people in your life. 100%. So you want to live a long life? You have to build relationships that matter to you and that you foster, that you are honorable in. Period. So hopefully that gives you some food for thought. In this video right here, I talk a little bit more about building that self-reliance, the habits that are required to get to a point where you can traverse the valley of despair and come out on the other side. So come check it out, and I'll see you over there. Remember, actualize your potential. Take care.